"Don't make me cry for you in front of your daughter," Claire says, loud and clean as a bell, and every head turns like a camera. A ripple of polite laughter slides along the pews. Someone snorts into a napkin. Mr. Lang smiles like he invented gravity, and my cheeks burn as if the church has been moved to a forge. "My name is Thomas Reed. I'm 49, from Akron, Ohio." And the words cut through me the way a winter windshield cracks. Straight, inevitable, full of tiny lines that promise to spider out forever. She is wearing the dress I paid for with 10 years of overtime and a mortgage paid down to the bone. She is the person I wanted to protect from cheap men and slick promises. The person whose tiny hand I first held as it wrapped around a metal ring, who used to fall asleep with her head on my shoulder after Little League games. She's the reason every paycheck quieted into saving and every $2 coffee became a forced charity for the future we built. "My real father is Mr. Lang," she tells the room like a verdict, and someone claps, an awkward, brittle clap, because that's what people do when they want to pretend the punchline is funny. My mouth opens, but no sound fits what my throat wants to throw at her, so I let the silence be a thing I can move into, step by step, like leaving a house on fire without looking back. The cake table sits just to my right, the silver server I bought for the occasion catching the chandelier light. I bought that server the winter she turned 7, engraved it with her name and the words, "For Claire, love Dad." And I remember sitting in the diner on East Market, the coffee sour and the heater whining, thinking that engraving would be the last stupid, romantic thing I'd ever be proud to do. The server gleams now as if it's blinking at me, a little disco for one. Megan, the planner, smiles in a freeze-frame way, hands clasped around a clipboard like a priest with a mortgage. And Tom, the venue manager, hovers near the door, lips pressed tight because business requires him to be useful without choosing sides. People are leaning in toward whatever scandal they assume they're witnessing because scandal is the buffet where everyone loads their plate. Mr. Lang, Richard Lang, with a tan that looks bought, a voice that sounds like studio lighting places, his hand on Claire's arm, and the gesture is practiced. He has been practiced at life longer than I've been allowed to teach mine. He calls me, in a tone designed to strip me of dignity without needing words, the man who paid, and the sentence is a nail. Bystanders who cheered at our daughter's Little League games a decade ago are hollowing out with a grin they think is civilization. A woman with a baby stroller points and says to her friend, "Well, you know how these things go," as if she knows everything I didn't. I taste copper and disappointment, and the whole room grows thin and loud, like an old radio tuning a station until only static remains. I want to stand, tell them that the thrift store shirts I wore to overtime shifts were ironed by hands that learned to hold a child and the mortgage and a second job, that every late night at the factory was a small sermon preached to a future where Claire would need to pick between money and people, but the words are thick as honey and just as useless. I stand anyway because my body won't stay a chair when my child is publicly folding me up into a souvenir. Claire's eyes flick to me, and for the blink of a second, I see a frightened kid behind them, the kid who once asked if monsters were real, and then decided to be one for the rest of us. Then she snaps back into the wedding day face she's cultivated with Mr. Lang's online tutorials, all polished angles and a willingness to betray for the view. "Sit," she says, and it's not gentle anymore. I sit. I leave the church like a man stepping from the warm side of a glass into cold. The front doors slam and the hollow sound feels like a verdict. Outside, the parking lot smells of rain and exhaust, truck headlights cutting through a low-falling drizzle. And for a moment, I want to get in my car and drive until the American map folds me up and spits me out somewhere that doesn't know my name. A couple leans into a car, their kid in the back seat asleep with a half-eaten pretzel in his fist. A bridesmaid sobs into the hem of a dress that must have cost more than my first apartment. I stand by my truck and look at the engraved server in the glove box, the tiny script under the blade like a punctuation mark on a life sentence. "You're the sum of what you give," I tell myself, because it helps to think in equations when your heart is being extracted. It's a brittle thought, but a thought nonetheless, the sort of arithmetic men live by when they don't have a chorus to sing their virtues. In the rearview mirror, Claire and Mr. Lang pass under the portico like a music video made for the same month. I drive away with the server in my hands and a plan unformed, like a seed that doesn't yet know it will be an oak. I do not call her. I do not speak. I pull into a diner that is a 10-minute haul from the church. Its neon sign buzzes, the chrome stools reflect decades of grease and conversation, and I order black coffee that smells like home and disappointment and the last honest thing a man can pour for himself. The waitress, Denise Harper, recognizes me because small towns keep receipts in their faces, and she brings the coffee without asking, as if she knows I'll forget to tip when it matters. I cradle the mug and let the heat get into my hands. A man can be a lighthouse for years and then be mistaken for a lamp, I say under my breath, the line arriving like a coin I didn't know I had. It's true. The difference between beacons and bedside lamps is not wattage, but the stories people tell about them. I leave the server wrapped in a napkin and my credit card with Denise for safekeeping because pride is a thing you sometimes pawn to prove you still own a reflection. The humiliation settles into bone like a slow ache, and I start to plan my disappearance from Claire's life as if it's a route on a map one that ends in a small house with a stubborn porch and a pocket of work that doesn't require me to audition for approval. I take a job at the auto shop on the west side, Marty's Transmission, a place where the air smells of oil and small, redeeming honesty, and I sleep in a room that has a lamp that doesn't pretend to be anything else. I know how to fix things that wheeze, how to coax a stubborn engine into tenderness, and for the first winter after the wedding, I let the routine be my tutor. I cut the ties in the polite, surgical way my life now requires. I stop attending family weekends, I refuse calls that sound like Claire's voice until she learns that apologies are not free mail, and I let the photographs in the hallway gather dust. People at the shop ask questions like flasks passed around. What happened? And I hold my cup like a shield. I watch football on the relic of a TV above the parts counter, and I let the plays be fables of less personal heartbreak. Men paid for glory with sweat, not with the betrayal of their own bones. Sometimes at night, my fingers find the engraving on that silver server as if my hands are an alternate memory, and I trace Claire's name until the letters blur into a promise I once made, and then broke myself by trusting everyone else to keep. The months fold into each other, and small practical successes stack like textbooks, saving a little, repairing a client's truck, getting a call from Denise who says, "There's a package here for you," which turns out to be a thank you card from a family we helped when their car died on the highway. The town starts to see me as the man who does transmissions, the same way I once hoped they'd see me as a father, and that mutability of identity is both a mercy and a threat. I begin to understand that thriving isn't loud. It's the slow rearrangement of a life until its center of gravity is bearable. When the first storm knocks a tree limb into power lines and the whole block is dark, I get my tools and climb the short ladder by reflex. Who else will do it if not the man who knows how to climb? And neighbors bring me beer and claps and a casserole that tastes like neighbors used to taste when we were simpler and kinder. My bank balance grows by inches. I learn how to be gentle with myself and brutal with the parts of my life that keep asking to be fixed by grace alone. Meanwhile, back in the world where Claire plays at being someone else's daughter, I hear whispers. Mr. Lang's investments weren't always as solid as the wedding brochure claimed. His rhetoric about private planes and philanthropy was talk dressed up in a suit. I do not root in gossip. Gossip is a dog that eats your hands. But small facts find my ears. Denise mentions that bank transfers to Lang Holdings look like smoke without a fire, that a contractor complained about unpaid invoices, that a social media post boasting a new yacht vanished like a ghost. I file these murmurs away not as petty triumph, but as observations from a man who has started to care about his dignity more than his humiliation. I begin to see the shape of something that could be done without violence. The law is long, but it bends toward truth if you feed it the right kindling. I hire a young paralegal named Javier Cruz, sharp, hungry, once a neighborhood kid who learned accounting like a prayer, and together we sort through public records and contractors' complaints. Javier wears a worn giant's cap and smokes his victory cigarettes over spreadsheets. He is the kind of ally who asks the right questions until the story starts to cough up facts. "We don't need to burn the whole house," he says once, riffling a stack of invoices. "We just need to pull the floorboards one by one." This becomes the plan in miniature. Find the misfiled payments, the shell companies that don't actually do anything but funnel money, the contractors with empty bank accounts and full ledgers. The investigation grows like a garden of small vindications. I do not spy because vengeance is not a hobby. I do it because the man who humiliated me has a life built of borrowed thunder, and I have a child's right to be part of my own story. I call Denise and ask her to keep an eye out for irregular transfers with a manner that makes it hard to refuse. She does it because she has seen men fall, and she knows what dignity looks like up close. Along the way, I quietly sell a few things I don't need: the old recliner, the set of golf clubs Mr. Lang once mocked me for never using, and fund the small legwork necessary to hire experts who can make messy financial language into a neat, prosecutable string. The months teach me patience in a way humiliation never could. It isn't the overt fist of revenge I had imagined in the dark nights after Claire's announcement. It's slower, surgical, a milker of time and attention until the man's house of cards notices one missing center card and begins to wobble. At night, I cook for myself, meatloaf exactly the way my mother taught it, the smell filling a small apartment, and sometimes I imagine Claire standing in my kitchen like the girl who agreed to go to the school fete with me once, her hands sticky from cotton candy, her laugh small and bright. Those moments are not temptations to revert. They are reasons to keep the plan clean. At the end of the year, an anonymous tip to the regulator about Lang Holdings accounts begins to do the rest. Auditors who do not like being fooled find the trail left too well, and subpoenas move like winter toward a thaw. "A crooked ledger will tell you more truth than a polished smile," I murmur in the quiet hours because it's true, and because saying it out loud makes the world a little more honest. The noose doesn't show itself in one dramatic pop. It tightens by paper and ink, by bank transfers that can't explain themselves when a federal auditor asks directly what their purpose was. The tightening is exquisite and surgical. I am careful. This is not about applause, and I have learned too early that public validation is a cheap currency. Javier and Denise hand me printouts like gifts, and each one is a small victory. Invoices paid to firms that exist only on paper, transfers timed to coincide with speeches of philanthropy, tax filings with curious gaps. I bring the evidence to an attorney, a woman named Lavra Benton, no relation, the kind of professional whose handshake smells faintly of disinfectant and competence. She reads the files like a priest, eyebrows lowering in a way that promises trouble for someone. "This is tidy," she says, and the simple praise is the closest thing to catharsis I have allowed myself. We craft a complaint not out of malice, but out of obligation to the filings. Allegations of fraud, misrepresentation, and unpaid contractors who have been eating on credit cards while Mr. Lang posted glossy photos of yachts at sunset. We are not loud about the accusations. We are precise, clinical, and the machinery of law starts to churn. The dance of subpoenas is anticlimactic in the way machinery can be: tedious, necessary, and efficient. Meanwhile, Claire posts honeymoon photos with Mr. Lang's arm around her in that way that says possession is a background of the picture. And some nights I want to throw my phone into the river and let all their curated vistas drown, but I do not. I keep plumbing for truth, for receipts and affidavits from workers who were stiffed and from vendors who recall the smell of unpaid invoices. We talk to a contractor named Luis who drives a tow truck and smells of diesel and patience. He tells us stories of half-finished jobs and bounced checks like a man reciting a curse. That ledger he gives us, crumpled, coffee-stained, a notebook of grudges, becomes a key we hand to Laura Benton. There is a strange theater in assembling the case. We are not actors, but the act is oddly theatrical. The courtroom a stage where small men and big men find out whether the world still tends to fairness. I watch the court dates pile on, watch Mr. Lang's choices begin to look like improvisation without a script. He hires counsel with a suit so sharp it looks offensive. He continues to be charming in public because charm is his product. But charm is not an exemption from accountability. We sit through depositions where Mr. Lang's smile slips just enough so that a reporter notes it and tweets it, and the tweet finds its own small life. At one hearing, a bank official testifies that particular transfers to shell companies carry signatures that match Mr. Lang's, but routing numbers that correspond to accounts that never had business activity. A judge raises both eyebrows, one of those gestures that says the courtroom is not a place for a theater. The legal process is slow, thick with motions and discovery, but each filing is like a steady, honest hand removing a plank from a precarious gallows. Friends from the shop bring casseroles and dad jokes. I accept them like armor. I do not gloat, though sometimes satisfaction is a quiet thing that sits in my chest like warmth. The press begins to sniff. Local colonists who once nodded when Mr. Lang donated to the hospital now ask about his sources of wealth and the smell of dust under the rugs he keeps in plain view. Claire calls once brash, wounded, pleading, but I let it ring in the hallway until it stops. I have learned that true mercy is not the immediate reunification of broken things. Sometimes it is allowing someone to face the consequence of their choices. A bankruptcy filing follows like a winter storm roll. Auditors find more than they'd expected: loans secured against art that doesn't exist, staged donations, vendor lists that are more fiction than ledger. Mr. Lang's facade begins to peel in public the same way a sunburn come August cracks into rawness. The investors who stood in his orbit start to move their chairs away. Philanthropy retreats when the coffers are questioned. Contractors who once said nothing because they needed work now stand up in depositions and tell the truth like a relief at being heard. I sit in the back of one hearing and feel the room tilt as the truth comes forward, not as a shout, but as an accumulation of small, honest voices. Justice isn't fireworks, I tell Javier's file stack. It's the steady light of a lighthouse reminding ships of the rocks. He nods like a man who loves similes almost as much as winning. The authorities freeze accounts, file for a receivership, and Mr. Lang is forced into a place where charm cannot make money appear, into a courtroom where paper is sovereign. The photograph of him in the glossy magazine where he once smiled as he made a speech about community now sits beside a caption about charges and restitution, reality and image in an uncomfortable juxtaposition. I do not dance on the ruins. I watch them like one watches a slow, cleansing rain. There is a particular hearing where the bankruptcy trustee brings an item to the table. The silver server I once bought claimed by Mr. Lang as a party expense on a list of items paid for by funds traced through his company. The server is not the legal linchpin, but the sight of it on a copy of a ledger is perfect and small, and it feels like a microphone drop. The judge reads entries and frowns. Outside the courthouse, on a concrete step, I let my hands rest on the cool metal of that server, and for a moment almost hear Claire's laugh from a decade ago pure, not arranged. The exposure continues, and the consequences follow like snowfall accumulating until the world is white and honest. Claire's call comes months later, not searching but transactional. She needs help because the marriage is over. The funds dried up quicker than hairline cracks. And Mr. Lang is gone in the way that men built on other people's promises vanish when the check bounces. She sounds brittle in the line, her voice a thrift store dress trying to fit a person who has outgrown it. Dad, she starts, and then the new outline of who she is scrapes against who she could have been. I am standing in the doorway of the diner I sometimes work part-time in on Sundays, flipping eggs with a concentration that has nothing to do with eggs, when her voice arrives like a blow. She says she needs a place to stay until she finds a job. She says the bank took the house and her things are in storage. She says, "I can't believe it happened," which is the kind of line people use when they'd like to be the victim instead of the architect. I listen, and I hear the brittle ego of someone who has learned to ask for charity now that wealth has walked off stage. I let the silence size her up while the grill hisses. The customers, regulars who know my hands and my past watch me like a mirror of their own possible responses. I have a decision to make that feels like a scale with both sides lit by spotlights. Help the daughter who publicly humiliated me and risk being used again, or let the world do what it must and watch her meet the consequences of a life spent preferring image to truth. The legal process has not made me vindictive, only clear-headed. I've seen what fraud does to honest people, and the last thing I want is to be the safety net for someone who traded our mutual history for lipstick and a better last name. I tell Claire, quietly, that I have an offer. I will not give her the keys to the life she walked away from, but I will give her a job on my terms, and a place to stay while she proves she can keep a promise. She chokes on the idea like a swallowed pill. Anger and hurt flash in equal measure. "You'd make me work," she says, incredulous. "Yes," I answer. "You will learn how to be useful without filters. You will learn to be ashamed and then to be accountable, and maybe you'll rebuild something that isn't rented." In those moments, I see not only the stubborn, offended daughter, but also the frightened child who can't manage being needy without shame. She is still in there. I offer a conditional bridge because I'm not a monster and because sometimes being stern is the last loving thing a father can do. She shows up at the diner in the rain, suitcase in hand, and the world seems like a movie where the protagonist chooses a sober middle path instead of melodrama. The first weeks are a series of small humiliations. Burnt toast, a spilled pot of coffee, a tab left unpaid because she assumed credit where responsibility belonged. The regulars watch this progress with a kind of interest reserved for horticulture. They love to see growth, but they are also impatient with it. Claire is angry at first, and then she is ashamed, and finally she is quietly industrious. Meanwhile, the legal process has done its part. Mr. Lang has been charged, and the press coverage is not as sensational as the pundits promised. But it's enough the man who once dressed like Fortune is now seen in photographs with an expression that looks like regret or the lack of a better cosmetic. Restitution orders come down, contractors get paid with money that used to vanish into non-existent accounts, and the world rights itself a little. For Mr. Lang, there is a pillory of paperwork and the humiliation of being asked to explain where the money went while cameras roll. He offers excuses, some theatrical, which is what he knows best. For Claire, the public humiliation is a slow-cooked stew. Friends who once flocked now keep safe distances, the honeymoon photos become a cautionary tale, and her social feed cools into human-sized content. The engraved server returns to my hands once again, a small shining punctuation, when in a hearing, the trustee returns items that were wrongly listed as company property. I request it quietly. The judge permits because it is a triviality in litigation, but a monumental thing in my chest. I do not wave it like a banner. Instead, I hold it the way someone holds a photograph of a thing they loved and lost. I take it home, polish the script until the letters gleam, and then I do something small and perfectly measured. I put the server in a velvet box and consign it to an auction for the vendors who had been stiffed. An auction that the community attends not with spectacle, but with the kind of dignity that comes from paying what you owe. When the hammer falls and bids go toward men who had been cheated, I feel an old, raw stitch pull free. No one dies. No one is physically broken beyond the usual wear and tear of justice. But the man who built his life on the money of others is left to live in the ruins of the habit that made him. No yachts, no staged philanthropy photos, a reputation thinned. He faces consequences that are legal and social in equal measure. And the phrase, "for sale," tastes like truth on the lips of those who once courted him. Claire stands in the back of the room and watches the auction. Her face is a map of regret and recognition, not the triumphant headline she once sought. She comes to me afterward with eyes that have lost the glare and found a little honesty. She does not ask to be accepted back into the same orbit. She asks for a chance to be decent. I do not hug her like the easy result I once might have. I offer her instead a recipe for meatloaf and a list of chores she must master before she can count on me. She takes the list like a repentant apprentice. The town accepts her smaller presence the way an old dog accepts a new leash. It takes time, but it's possible. The man whose charm once rearranged people's loyalties moves to a quieter place where he contemplates his faults without the frippery of adulation. I watch him walk away from the public stages he once owned and feel not triumph but the unsettling peace that follows a storm. The final justice is not the ruin of a person, but the restoration of balance. Those who were wronged are paid, those who lied are called to account, and a daughter who traded love for glamour learns that what you buy can never buy your way back into someone's heart. I'm left with a scar and a silver server and a new life that's quieter and, for the first time in years, truly mine. Life teaches a lesson that can be stated plainly. People will show you their true price when they think it convenient. After that, you decide whether to be the bank or the safe harbor. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps us share more true stories like this.